Welcome to Daily Work Remote Strategies here with the coaches of Silicon Valley Change. I am thrilled and delighted to have David Pollay here with us. I actually have his books right here with me. I'll leave them right by my sides. I love these books. I refer to them regularly, The Law of the Garbage Truck and The Three Promises. So he is as you know, best-selling author in many internationally translated languages and countries. He's a TEDx speaker. He's a fantabulous coach, and he gives a lot of workshops. So I'm delighted to have him here with us. Hello, David.
Hello, Senya. Hey, thanks for having me. This is a lot of fun. And for those who are joining today, I've known Senya for a long time. She's a good friend, a great friend, and a dear colleague. And so it's a pleasure to be here. Senya, just this morning, I was gathering my notes for this webinar today, and I ran across an email from 4 years ago that came in, and it was interesting because it was from the Alaska Fire Department, and they were asking about the law of the garbage truck. And the reason why I shared it is because it's really connected to what we're going through today with the first responders being there to take care of us with coronavirus and keeping us safe. And it just talked about this leader from one of the Alaskan cities said that the law of the garbage truck truly speaks to reducing the stress we encounter as emergency responders on a daily basis. I started chills when I read this. Many of us join the emergency service to provide service to our community. In most days, we are thanked and appreciated. Unfortunately, though, we experience plenty of moments which could easily become garbage, which I'll explain shortly to our teammates who are becoming more familiar with the law of the garbage truck. And just said, your book is the best description of how we can change our outlook to reduce that stress and build up our strength for the job that we do. And I just thought that was really, wow, neat.
David, how relevant, how very similar 4 years ago and now what first responders are going through, and even sometimes what everybody feels like they're going through, even if it's 1 minute a day, but just the stress that can come up.
That's right. Yeah, that's how I felt as well. And so here's the connection to the law of the garbage truck over the course of many years. I've been teaching this in one way or another for more than 20 years. And the reality in business and in life is that we're constantly running into people that have negative attitudes, negative behaviors, and we ourselves have it from time to time, and fellow travelers or customer service agents or our bosses or our family members. And there's a lot of negativity that is around us. A lot of good things, a lot of great things. And I focus on a lot of my work on identifying the things that we can do to increase our joy every day, do what we love, make a difference. But one skill that we have to build, whether it's through my work or somewhere else, is you have to build the skill of navigating negativity. Because if not, you'll be captured, you'll be shackled to other people's behaviors and other people's views, and you'll lose your freedom. So the law of the garbage truck, and what I'm going to teach today in a really expedited manner. I almost want to tell you that I'm going to talk real fast, and then you can replay this slowly so that it won't be such a fast run through. But the main thing is that there's just negativity all around us, and how do we navigate it? And so one of the things that I've encountered recently is, in fact, I was invited to give the graduation speech at 3 schools in Florida, high schools in Florida. And I thought, what's one of the things that's most in common with my executives that I coach in business with the students who are graduating from high school? And when I thought about it, and when I did some additional research in preparation for today, I found that what's needed for success in business and what's needed for success in coming out of high school and going into college and going into jobs is the ability to navigate negativity, the ability to decide what's important and what's beyond your control, and what's important and within your control, and what is not important and is not in your control, and you don't want to focus on it at all. So that's what executives and 18-year-olds, and my daughters are almost that age, they have in common. No matter what level in the organization, you've got to be able to navigate negativity. So what I'm going to share with you in short order is the problems of negativity real quick, to make sure we understand just how big a problem it really is if it's unaddressed. Create some awareness for yourself in terms of your relationship with negativity. And I also want to introduce you to this framework of looking at and approaching negativity, and in a way that's productive and helpful to you. I'm going to offer the law of the garbage truck as one solution. I'm going to actually tell the iconic story of me in the back of a New York City taxi cab. And then I'll give you a couple tools that I may be able to share during the 20 minutes that we're together, or during the Q&A. And I'll do whatever I can to, even if we run out of time, to make myself available through Senya to answer additional questions. So the first thing is we've got three major problems with negativity. And the first is we let other people dump on us. We let other people take the negative stuff that we can't control and dump on us. And we're left feeling as bad as they were, or worse, because they leave, and then we're left with this hangover of negative feelings and experiences. And what there's research that demonstrates that the way we respond to day-to-day negativity is as important as the way we have to deal with bereavement, divorce, and other serious things. And why? Because every day we're encountering this, and whether we're on the streets or at home, or right now, obviously at home, but we're encountering this negativity, and we've got to deal with it. Robert Sapolsky at Stanford University has said that if we invoke the stress response system too often, it starts to whittle away at our cardiovascular health. Susan Folkman and Robert Lazarus have also shown that, again, the way we respond day to day is just as powerful as the big stuff in our lives. That's the first problem. There's a second problem. Even if you are doing all the right things, and people are, let's say, super nice to you, and you're very good at not letting people dump on you, the challenge then is you don't want to dump on yourself. And how do you do that? Well, when we replay activities or events in our lives, and we get into regret or into resentment, we're creating garbage in our lives without even having to involve anybody else. Or when we look into the future, and rather than think about preparation and worry, we get into toxic worry, where we are looking at the worst case scenarios and playing those through our mind throughout the day. That is a major problem and not good for our health. It can turn us into pessimists. And I shared this research with Senya the other day, and it was fascinating. Science Daily, and what they found after studying for years men and women, that when individuals were compared based on their initial levels of optimism, the researchers found that the most optimistic men and women demonstrated on average an 11 to 15% longer lifespan. So they live 11 to 15% longer, the optimists do. And 50 to 70% greater odds of reaching 85 years old compared to the least optimistic group. 50 to 75%. I mean, this is huge. We used to say that being happy is even more powerful than not smoking. Well, this is even bigger. And so they talk about past 85 as exceptional longevity. So I've been telling my mom, who just turned 87, she's exceptional on many fronts, and in longevity. Thank God, thank goodness, she is with us. Then the third problem is that we dump on others rather, and we get caught up in revenge and what we should have said and what we could have said, and we plan it, but we start to relive those moments. And I'll say to somebody, look, you're fired up right now about that individual who's not even here, not even thinking about us, and we haven't talked about, you know, that they haven't even been in your lives for 10 years, and you're fired up. We can get so upset and angry that we end up taking that energy and dumping it on other people. And so the research I wanted to touch on was just Brad Bushman and his colleagues had discovered that when we ruminate and when we chew on the bad things of life, it puts us in a place where we are more likely to do what they call in psychology is displaced aggression, where we're full of so many of these slights and little things that we've taken personally throughout the day, that when someone triggers us, we respond disproportionately and inappropriately to that person. And that's where someone will go, well, what just happened? Like, what did I do? You know, and they might not respond lightheartedly with what did I do? With a smile. So that's a big challenge. And so the first thing that I want to share with you, and I'll slow down for a second. Aren't you glad Sandy had us do a stretch? So you can run with this guy who's talking a mile a minute. Is that I had an experience in New York City now about 30 years ago. And one of the ways I measure how old I am is by how many years there's been since the time of this event. And the story I told, I put out in a newspaper column years and years ago, and put it online, and then it ultimately became the book, The Law of the Garbage Truck. And I'll tell you the story. And it's meant to help. It evolved over time when I was trying to help people focus on what's important. So here's the story. I was in New York City. It's called The Law of the Garbage Truck. This is what I named it. And so I'm in New York City, and if we were an audience, I'd ask you, how many people have been to New York, and raise your hand, and how many people have been in New York City taxi cab, raise your hand, and then there are those people who don't raise their hand at all. And I said, well, how many people have been to New York? And then say, how many people have actually been in a car, So anyway, so I'm in New York City getting ready to go to Grand Central Station. I put up my arm just as you do to flag down a taxi. Taxi pulls over, I jump right in, and we take off for Grand Central Station. Now, in New York City, there are no speed limits, so you can go as fast as you want. Yeah, well, there's a lot of traffic, so it's not too fast, but unless it's the middle of the night. Anyway, I'm in this taxi, and we're driving on the right-hand lane, going at a pretty good clip to get me there on time, when all of a sudden, out of the right parking space on the right side of the street, cuts directly a black car takes a big, sharp turn right into our lane, so quickly and dangerously that my taxi driver has to slam on his brakes, and the tires squeal, and we skid almost right into the back of that black car. Now, what happened next blew me away. The driver of the other car, the car that almost caused the major accident, that could have sent us to the hospital, the driver turns around and starts yelling swears at us. Ask me how I know. I mean, some words in New York come with that very special face. And then he's throwing us up one finger that makes us look like we're number one, I think. And then the insight that really came was what happened next with the taxi driver. I'm sitting in the back seat thinking, what just happened? This is really bad, and this guy's behavior is horrible. And the taxi driver, he just pulls up next to the gentleman in the black car and just says, he smiles, he waves, he wishes him well, and he moves on. And not taunting, just, it's like, it's okay, cool, it's all right, let's go. And he moves along. And again, I'm still sort of shocked about what happened. And so I ask, and I yell out loud, why'd you just do that? This guy could have killed us, and you're being so friendly. And that's when he told me something about people can be like garbage trucks. And so over the years, I came up with the law of the garbage truck to describe what insight I gained that day. And so the law of the garbage truck goes like this. people are often, many people are like garbage trucks. I get so excited. My own thing had to look down. Many people are like garbage trucks. They run around full of garbage, full of frustration, full of anger, and full of disappointment. And as their garbage piles up, they do what garbage trucks do. They look for a place to dump it. And if you let them, they'll dump it on you. So when someone wants to dump on you, don't take it personally. Just smile, wave, wish them well, and move on. And move on. So that's where I sat then in the back of the taxi, and I was thinking, how often do I let garbage trucks, people who have frustrations that are beyond my control, negative things that I can't do anything about, how often do I let those garbage trucks run right over me and dump their garbage? And it was then that I realized I didn't want to do that anymore. I don't want to take other people's garbage and turn around and dump it on other people. I don't want to do it to my family. I don't want to do it to my coworkers. I don't want to do it to my bosses. I want to know what I can control, what I can't control, and let that pass by. So the lesson, here's what happened. I started to see garbage trucks, and I started being able to parse them out where if it was an important issue, I'd address it. And if it was an issue that was not important, I would be able to let that pass by more and more over time, building the skill. And so the little boy in the movie, The Sixth Sense, if you've seen that movie, little boy says, "I see dead people." Well, now I see garbage trucks. I see the load they're carrying. I don't make it personal. I don't make it a personal thing. And then I move on. Because I see the lesson here is that there's going to be people are going to come at us, and events are going to come at us, and we can't fight every fight and get into battle with everything, or else we're going to be in a whole load of trouble. So what I've found is that we find ourselves in two cycles of energy that we have to choose where we want to be in. And that is the cycle of garbage, the garbage cycle, or the gratitude cycle. And I'll just tell it to you briefly. The gratitude cycle is when we are grateful and optimistic, and we're complimenting people and appreciating their strengths and looking for the best. And the garbage cycle is when we're focusing on revenge, and we're focusing on regret, and we're gossiping, and we're rumoring, and so forth. So we find ourselves in between those two, and we want to make sure that we're making a conscious effort to move into the gratitude cycle and focus on those, bringing out people's positive emotions, their natural strengths, making a difference, and not getting caught up in all of the negative stuff that doesn't take us far, except makes us uncivil and unkind. And that's something we really want to, of course, avoid. So that is what I really want to share with you. It's a bunch of stuff around tools. I'll just mention that one key is to learn to pivot from a garbage truck conversation where sometimes people take over the whole mood of a meeting by the story that they share about the traffic or their argument they had and so forth. And people become trapped in a conversation, and it sets a whole mood of a meeting. So there are verbal pivots, and those pivots are acknowledging what someone has said, and then moving on, in fact, to something that is more productive and gets people focused in the right manner. So if that's interesting, I can talk about that in the Q&A. Also, don't dump garbage on people, give them good feedback. And I have a methodology that I use to give people good feedback and developmental feedback in a way that doesn't create garbage that oftentimes performance reviews do. People get resentful, or they get frustrated in the way that they're being reviewed and communicated to. And so I have that tool available. We can talk about that if that's interesting. Power of gratitude and recognizing people in the way that they want to be recognized. I have another couple questions that I ask executives and ask them to ask their people. That, again, if that's interesting, talk about that. I talk about how I've blown it in both ways, and I'll just leave you with two things quickly. A quote from Viktor Frankl, and it's one of my favorites. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. That's what the law of the garbage truck is meant to help us do, that we don't just react, respond automatically, but rather we think how we want to respond in the big picture. And that is just as authentic as letting out your first reaction. And so I have people all around the world take a pledge, and we won't take the time to do it now, but people from more than 50 languages in over 100 countries have taken the No Garbage Trucks pledge, and have focused on what's important in their lives, focused on what's important and letting the negative things they can't control pass them by so they can be at their best for the people they care about at work, at home, and on the street and in the schools. So that is the quick rundown, and I'm grateful to be here. I'm glad you guys have come to join us.
Thank you so much, David. Thank you so much. We're already getting comments and questions for you. Thank you. And I just want to add, thank you. I have heard you tell the law of the garbage truck, and each time I tell it, I just want to share with the people here, I always think of David as such a storyteller. So he has encouraged me to write down and to tell more stories. If you read The 3 Promises, it's almost like a story per page, or a story every 2 pages. And it's very relatable when you do that. So thank you for telling that, because we can see you in that taxi cab. We can feel that. We can feel the frustration.
I appreciate that, Cindy. Thanks for what you said.
You gave us a choice of things to, so I'll just summarize. You told us here are the problems with negativity. Here are a few tools or a few ways to frame. Here's the law of the garbage truck, and then some other things to talk about. So we've got 2 questions for you right up from the people. Let me just say, anybody who joined us for the 20 minutes, thank you. And we look forward to seeing you again tomorrow at 11 a.m. And here we are. Thank you. And here we are with the coaching with David, the one-on-one coaching for you for the questions you have. Okay, we have a number of people who are saying verbal pivots. So could you tell us more about verbal pivots? And then just to kind of seed it in the back of your head, the next question we'll have is, how do you give feedback to people like coworkers who dump on you? But first, let's go with verbal pivots. So you're in that room and somebody's saying, oh man, this didn't happen and this didn't happen and this was lousy. How do you do that verbal pivot in a way that's not mean?
Yeah, I'm glad someone asked, because in the Law of the Garbage Truck, the first book, I focused on framework and mindset versus let's just come up with tactics for responding. Now, the second book I'm working on includes the tactics, and the tactics are the pivots. And the pivot basically is acknowledging what someone has said. So, and I can, there are a whole bunch of, like, for example.
Somebody just asked to show the books again, so I will show them here while you're speaking. Go ahead.
That's the best of books I've looked all year. You're holding them up. Thank you, Sonia. But so a verbal pivot might be, that's interesting, or simply the simplest thing is thank you for sharing, or thank you for telling me that, and then you just go on to the next subject, or that's interesting, and a little pause. And then say, I wanted to ask you, and then you can go back to that person with a question or invite them into the agenda of the meeting that's coming up. There are things of, for example, that's interesting, and what were you able to accomplish? Or that sounds hard, and I'm happy that you were safe. Or that's interesting, and that. Or another one, this is from my daughters, said, I can see why you might be frustrated, but that's not my experience. Or I can see why you don't get along. I can see why you might not get along with so-and-so, but that's not what I've experienced. And then one of my daughters, Eliana, said that do it lightheartedly as best you can, so you don't You know, it's like remember to smile. And when you say things, it takes the pressure off of the feedback. So
So thank you, or that's interesting, or it sounds like name their possible emotion. So that sounds frustrating, or that's sad, or I can see why that would make you add. So kind of give a name to what you're hearing.
Perfect, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah.
And then hop into something else. Okay, so in a sense, you're giving them a little bit of validation, which is probably why they're bringing it up anyway. You're just kind of really trying not to dwell on it for the goal of yourself and the other people at the meeting.
Right. That's exactly right. And ultimately for them too, because people often make conversation around negative things just because they don't know what else to talk about. Or they're just emotionally triggered at that moment, but they don't really want to be the negative person in the meeting. And so by graciously pivoting versus like, I don't want to hear it, talk to the hand, this little more diplomatic.
Okay, next question, and I believe the last question for you, and we may stay on a little bit later, but the last question for our formal call is,
sure.
How do you give feedback to people, for example, coworkers, who dump on you?
Yeah, a great question. There are two approaches. One, and the first one is, I talk about this in the Law of the Garbage Truck, the book, is you want to catch, if someone's doing this regularly, they are seeming to be a garbage truck more often than not. So what you want to do is catch that person when they're at their best and when they're doing something really lovely and kind and supportive, and thank them at that point in time. But also if it's been difficult reaching them up to that point, is to be able to say, I want to thank you for blah, blah, blah. This is what you did, and this is how it impacted me, and it means a lot. And this is when I feel best in our relationship, when we're communicating in this way. And I want you to know that it means a lot to me that you have communicated in this way. And when you're short with me and frustrated and shut and don't want to have conversation, that is as hard for me because I don't feel as close to you as I do right now, and I want to thank you. So there's humility in the share, and there's also vulnerability in us when we say to somebody that we really don't want them to be a garbage truck regularly in our lives.
So really just catch them doing something right, something ungarbage trucky.
Yeah, because that's when they're not, it's like that's their underbelly. When they're in a garbage truck moment, they are defensive, they're protective, I don't want to hear it, they don't listen. And that's probably true for all of us. I mean, when I act like a garbage truck, that's true for me too. But when you're in that positive space, it's like the underbelly of a armadillo or something that you can make contact. And
that should be the name of your third book. It could also be Yellow, the underbelly of the armadillo, and other tools by David Pollay.
That's pretty funny. That's catchy. That's a good one.
I'm going to ask the participants on the call, both here on Zoom and in the Facebook group, what is one takeaway you have from today? Whether it's the bravo, someone said bravo to you on that, on the armadillo title, perhaps.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
What is one takeaway you have, whether it's about the problems with negativity, whether it's about how you can use the garbage truck? What is one takeaway that you will be taking away and using? And as you start to type those in, I'm going to end with another stretch for us. And this is a stretch that should make all of us feel good. So everyone, give yourself a hug. One of our coaches did that on the call the other day. And it looks really funny, like you're putting your elbows into the screen, but it feels really good. So in this physical distancing world, thank you for joining us, for giving yourself a hug. And I'll just end with some of the things that people are saying. So verbal pivots, giving feedback kindly, listening, validating people's point of view, and just being attentive to where your own scale is. So that's what people are taking away.
That's terrific. That's great. Thank you, Sanya.
Thank you so much, David. Thank you for being with us today. Thank you.
My pleasure. It's been fun.
All the best. See everybody tomorrow at 11 a.m. Pacific for 20 minutes. We look forward to seeing you again. All the best. Bye.